Good morning, everybody. I'm Trevor Cunningham, Deputy Warden for the Municipality District of Yarmouth and Chair of the Planning Advisory Committee. Our Thursday, November 25th meeting. And just as an explanatory note, start things off, on our website, if you're wanting to follow the agenda, it's actually under the PAC October 25th, 2021 PAC meeting, as this is we simply recessed and it's all one meeting. So if you want to access the agenda, it's there. The previous learnings from our presenters, as well as the learnings that we'll be undertaking today. So I'll call a meeting back to order and like to start with a land acknowledgement. Modi acknowledges that we are on the traditional lands of the Acadia First Nation, part of Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral territory of the Mi'kmaq people. So before we begin the presentation, I'd like to remind everyone, due to the pandemic, the meeting is available to the public through a live stream on Facebook, and minutes will also, once approved, be posted for public viewing. The presenter slides will be issued along with the approved minutes. There's a significant amount of information to work through. Therefore, we want to be respectful of time allotments made for each presentation. During the question and answer portion of each presentation, I will give the floor to the members of the PAC in the order requested. Each member may pose one question and one follow-up question. Then the floor will be ceded. Once each member who has a question has posed their question, then if time allows, additional questions may be posed by members in the same sequential manner. Just one more note, the presentations will be 30 minutes in duration with a 15-minute Q&A for each. The only exception to that will be the Department of Fisheries and Oceans, the Provincial Department of Fisheries and Oceans. Their presentation will be an hour with a half hour for questions, because they are the governing body for approvals for environmental pieces around aquaculture. So without further ado, I'll introduce Mr. Chris Milley. I understand Chris he told us before we started, he lived in Yarmouth, so welcome back to Yarmouth. And I'll let you begin, Mr. Milley.
Actually, Mr. Chair, sorry, I don't know if you can see everybody on your screen, but we do need a motion to amend the agenda.
Oh, sorry, yes. Okay, so do I have a mover to amend the agenda? Yes, Councillor Cushing, seconder. Councillor Durkee, all those in favor signify by saying aye. 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 All those opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, everybody. Mr. Milley.
Okay, I'll share my screen so you can see the presentation.
Thank you.
If I share the right screen. You can see this, I think. Let me make sure I get this right.
We can, yes.
Okay, now I'm going to do this. And which screen do you see? Do you see the full slides, or do you see the presenter slides?
Full slides, or sorry, the presenter slide.
Okay, so I have to do.
No, that's the full slide, Mr. Milley.
No, full
Okay.
slide, yeah.
Okay.
We're seeing the presenter, we're seeing the
full slide, okay.
the right-hand side, but we are seeing the entire slide.
So I just want to, just for the presentation, I just want to make sure that I get the context set. I want to make it known that I am neither pro nor anti aquaculture. I think that every initiative in its context should be considered in its fullest opportunity. Aquaculture is an important part of the food production systems in much of the world. It's also a very important and viable business. At the same time, aquaculture does have impacts that are of concern to people, and it's understanding the balance between the benefits of an aquaculture initiative and the risks or the changes that result in aquaculture, that result from aquaculture, is the task that I think any government, municipal, provincial, and federal, have to deal with. For example, land-based aquaculture in Belize, where I used to work, has removed mangroves, which destabilize the coast and causes long-term detriment. But at the same time, the employment that comes from it have to be considered as well. Understanding the responsibilities of the governments in assessing the impacts for decision-making, which is, I think, what you are doing now as the Planning Advisory Committee. Not often enough do municipalities get involved with this kind of review, and it should be happening more. So I applaud the municipality of Yarmouth for doing that. And really what the focus of my talk today will be about the need for reliable information. Evidence-based decision-making is not as easy as one thinks. Besides being president of Nexus Coastal Resource Management, I am an adjunct professor in the Marine Affairs program at Dalhousie, where I teach numerous courses, but one of them, contemporary issues in marine affairs. And the focus to the students these days is more and more on evidence-based decision-making, being critical thinkers, being honest brokers, making sure you're using good, reliable information to make a decision. And that comes down to advocacy versus evidence. You get people who are proponents and people who are adversaries who take on advocacy positions, and often without having all the facts. And we see this with anti-vaxxers. Evidence and advocacy are not necessarily aligned. Proponents and advocates often have very siloed perspectives. In other words, they're not looking at the other side of the equation and understanding that both sides have value. But both sides also have weak or incomplete information, and in some cases misinformation. And as decision makers, you must take a much more holistic perspective, which is in the interest of the public. So that's the context that I'm presenting this. So understanding the impacts, land-based aquaculture is not a panacea. I mean, there's a big push for people in Nova Scotia. You hear it more and more. We got to get away from open pen aquaculture. We got to go to land-based aquaculture. Well, land-based aquaculture also has impacts. Both have impacts, both bring benefits, and it's understanding what these risks and potential impacts are. Now, there's a common, benefits of aquaculture. They both produce food, they both produce livelihoods, and they share some of the benefits, but they also share some of the risks. And the risks are the impact on both the terrestrial environment and the marine environment. But also economically, they create risks. They create competition in the marketplace. But if they're managed properly, if fisheries and aquaculture are managed together economically, they can support each other. If they're done independently and competitively, they can harm each other. One can put the other under. Some of the impacts are beneficial. Some of the impacts are detrimental. We often refer to in public discourse, the detrimental impacts are referred to as risks. And people should be aware that risks and impacts are not the same. And these are biophysical, which I think is where you get most of the opposition. Most of the people that will have been presenting to you will be talking about the environmental risks, the detriment to the environment. But there are also economic risks. These economic risks are, as I just mentioned earlier, competition in the marketplace, competition for labor, competition for space. You can't use space twice. You can't do two things, especially when it comes to land-based aquaculture. You can't do two things on that land at the same time. But there are also social risks. And that's one thing I want to just touch on, that the social risks are much more subtle, but they're equally impactful. And there are cultural risks. And I actually put together and taught a course in the Department of Environmental, in School of Environmental Studies on culture and resource management. And if you look at the culture of Atlantic Canada, it's a fishing culture. If you look at the culture of Newfoundland, it's a fishing culture, but it's evolving into an oil and gas culture. So it's getting, music changes, style changes, employment changes, and the way people perceive their place will shift with the resource industries. And determining and understanding the potential impacts is the focus of an impact assessment. Prior to the new Impact Assessment Act, we used to do environmental assessment, and that was mostly about the biophysical environment. So most people involved with impact assessment are quite familiar with how to go out and do an environmental assessment. They know how to, what to measure, what the ecological impacts will be. But we don't make decisions based on what's good for the environment. We have always made decisions on what's good for society, what's good for us. And that's the reality. So we've always made decisions about the economic benefit, not the economic impact and the detrimental impacts. And now we understand that we have to start looking at that. So under the new Impact Assessment Act, we have to look at the economic impacts, the social impacts, and the cultural impacts. So there's, as I said earlier, there's significant public attention on the biophysical environment, the impacts, and you've had, I believe, presentations for people coming in and pointing out that the effluent of a land-based aquaculture carries into the marine environment the same issue as open pen aquaculture, if not more concentrated and more localized at the outflow. And the purpose of doing an impact assessment isn't to find a project where there is no change in the environment. Everything we do as society changes the environment. If we build a house, we change the environment. If we build a road, we change the environment. And sometimes we don't question whether it's a problem to the environment because the benefits are so significant to us. Building a house, you get shelter, you create jobs with housing market. Housing is a very high profile issue in society today because of the high cost of housing. We never sit back and say, well, what's the environmental impact of building new subdivisions? We don't do that because the benefits are so great compared to the detriment to the environment. We don't question that. If we're going to build a quarry, we do an environmental assessment. If we build a subdivision and take out as much rock as we would for a quarry by building all the foundations, we don't do an environmental assessment because the benefits are so significant. But when it comes to a project like an aquaculture farm or a quarry or a new highway or a new small craft harbor, we do an environmental assessment to determine whether the benefits exceed the risks. So, and the public who are not involved with the project often perceive that no change is acceptable change. But that's never going to be the case with anything we do as society. And there's a lot of research on this, that the perception of risk is always biased towards the worst case scenario. We're doing some work with one of the tidal energy projects and looking at how some things were done in Scotland. One of the companies that have got a very good track record with tidal energy in Scotland, when they did their assessment, they looked at the worst case scenario every time, and they used that as their example. So they actually got ahead of the public. The European Union had done a study on policy looking at risk assessment, and they looked at the perception of nuclear energy and pipelines. If you build a pipeline in Alberta, nobody questions it because they're used to seeing it. They don't see the risk because it's common. If you build a nuclear power station in Germany, people don't see the risk because they're so used to seeing them. The perception of risk goes down with familiarity. If you build a nuclear power station in Alberta, and they actually used Alberta in the study, if you build a nuclear power station in Alberta, everybody would be up in arms. There's no way you're going to put a nuclear power station in Ireland. And if you build a pipeline in Germany, they'd be going, no, you can't build a pipeline because, see, the perception of risk is always there because of lack of familiarity. We always perceive the risk to be the worst case scenario. And there's usually charged language. So the anti-project advocates use very, very charged language, a lot of rhetoric, using hyperbole. I was grading papers this week and seeing it come through with students that they're so used to using charged language. It's, this is the most important place in the world, and this is going to have, devastate and destroy the population of that species. They use very, very strong language. Similarly, you get the opposite with the proponents. Proponents tend to focus on the economic impacts. The people who oppose focus on the environmental impacts. People who are proponents focus on the economic impacts. They want to downplay any negative aspects. So they promote the optimal economic benefit, a panacea. We're going to create all these jobs, and we're going to, stimulate the economy. It's always the other extreme. So you get these two siloed perspectives using very charged language, which makes it difficult to see what the truth is. And they usually minimize the potential. It's like, oh yes, but we can fix that. We can mitigate that. The reality is there's going to be change. Is it acceptable? And that's the task of the decision makers. So neither position, the people coming before you often are trying to convince you that their way is what you really need is the right information to make the decision. So evidence-based decision-making requires trusted, unbiased, complete, reproducible information. And I know proponents don't like that because it takes time to do that. But there's a rushed decision doesn't necessarily make it better. And from a planning point of view, ideally the studies would be ongoing and you'd have all this information before the project comes forward. But you really do need someone to provide you with the information on the economic impacts, the social impacts, and there's no one's going to say this is exactly what's going to happen. British Columbia, the atmospheric river that went through British Columbia and caused the washout. Nobody predicted that. The unforeseen is, you can't model the unforeseen. So will the benefits, the positive effects, exceed the impacts, the detrimental effects? That's the question you have before you. Okay, so economic consideration. People usually look at the economic considerations in terms of dollars, but it isn't really about dollars. It's more than that. It's what will the impacts be on the labor for income and livelihoods in the municipality? How will it affect food production and food availability in the region? And we all know now from COVID that things change quite quickly when it comes to food availability and food security. Transportation systems, new projects put new demands on transportation or require new road upgrades or to handle product. It also creates competition in which can be a good thing because it creates more employment in the transportation sector, but it also could increase the cost of transportation. So that has an impact on existing industries. Other resource sectors as well, like extractive and non-extractive, they all have basically an oar in this water because they share the services that new industries will place. And it is not just whether it's aquaculture. We could be talking about a wind farm. We could be talking about a new light manufacturing facility, whatever. The impact on recreation. If you bring new employment, sometimes you bring a new demographic to the community. that there is a need for more recreation facilities. Are they there? Or if there's existing recreation facilities, does it put more demand on them so that there's not enough recreation facilities and opportunities for the community? We did a study for the municipality of Guysborough looking at the economic impact of the LNG development. And what we found is that the labor market that would be attracted for the project was exactly that demographic, which has been leaving the community on to go out west or wherever to work because there's no jobs in the region for that demographic. So the 29 to 45-year-olds, bringing them back brings back school-age kids. So that meant they would have to look at the school. Was the school going to have enough teachers? So we could see the impacts go right through every aspect of society. They could end up with either crowded classrooms or be able to maintain the existing. In this case, it was a matter of keeping the classrooms active because they didn't have enough students to keep the schools open. The environmental protection measures that need to be put in place, education, as well as the demands on governance for monitoring and managing the non-business aspects of the project. So how will the project impact the labor market? Will it create competition with other sectors? Will it be pulling people away that you don't have enough people to work shifts in fish plants? Or, if there's a stable employment at an aquaculture farm, does that mean that somebody may not be at the back of a boat? Average wages, will it affect the wage envelopes in order to keep employees at existing businesses and industries? Will they have to look at the impact of wage changes and the training that's available? Will it require specialized training, or will it require people to move into the area so you're not increasing employment for the unemployed in the region, but you're actually displacing or bringing people in? How will the project impact food security? Now, one thing that's been involved with a number of international meetings over the last couple of years, looking at the impact of COVID on the fishery. All over the world, the fishery has been impacted by COVID, partly because of the disruption of transportation, but also the disruption on food supply, so that people would normally, a fishery that may be exporting to Europe or Asia, all of a sudden is feeding people locally because they can't get food brought in from other regions because of transportation disruptions. And the aquaculture industry and the wild commercial fishery have both been impacted differently. So in Mexico, Central America, the aquaculture farms that would normally be exporting, they're now selling locally. And the commercial fisheries products that are going into the international market are products that are value added, so they have extended shelf life. Fresh fish is moving less frequently from some regions to other regions because of the disruption in the transportation and the storage. The initial hoarding in post-COVID, the onset of COVID that caused everybody to go out and hoard, that removed all of the canned and frozen product in the European market, in the Asian market. And that's where people realize that extended shelf life products have a better market potential on the international trade than fresh fish. And people are buying more locally. So that's changing the nature of the market. It's also changing the amount that people can get for their product. And aquaculture has been affected by this the same as the commercial fisheries. So we don't know what the long-term effects of transportation disruption, climate change impacts on aquaculture. So getting an industry that's established based on market principles and market potential 2 years ago is going to be very different today. What skills are needed? Are these skills that are available, or will they need to be imported? I've already talked about that. And the impact on transportation, competition for cargo space, and demand on the transportation networks, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you're being pressured to make decisions. Project proponents want a quick and affirmative decision. Project adversaries want a deferred and negative decision. That's normal. Don't make a decision until you've done the study. And proponents want make a decision because we promise we're going to do this. Neither are it's almost what I'm saying is put on the blinders a little bit and think this through by getting the right information to make the decisions. You need reliable, unbiased, accurate, and complete information on all the aspects of the impacts and the benefits and how they'll affect. So my recommendation for you would be to do a preliminary assessment of the economic, social, and environmental impacts to be conducted by the municipality. I think that you have a number of people working in the municipality and a number of people in the region who could do a very good job for you. This might be, you call on staff to just start to mine the information that's there. There's a lot of history on the impacts in other jurisdictions, and you may have to bring people in to do specialized studies, but it's quite easy to do nowadays with online surveys and virtual engagement tools. So, and that is my brief presentation. I wish I had answers for you. The answer is find them.
Well, thank you, Mr. Milley. That for me as chair, and I'm sure other folks as well, that really frames our continued work up very, very well. It was, I think, an excellent presentation, and learning about the issue, having the studies conducted so that we can make a firm, and correct, I'll say correct, informed decision, evidence-based decision is that's valuable advice in my view, because there are certainly benefits and there are certainly things that aren't benefits to any project. So I'll open the floor up to questions from PAC members. Ms. Brooks, Theo Brooks.
I could just make a suggestion, Mr. Chair, just to help Jenny as she supports Chair Cunningham. If you can use the raise your hand function in the Zoom, that way Jenny will be able to see the order that the hands have gone up just to support the chair.
And it's better for me as well, and it does order them. So Councillor Durkee's first. Councillor Durkee?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually, Councillor Cushing was first, but I just got to the hand raising faster on the screen.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Chris. I really, really appreciated your unbiased approach to this. My question to you is, obviously, you have seen these economic, social, and cultural impact studies done. Any idea how long something like that would take?
How could I say this? A lot of consultants will tell you it'll take a long time because it's the nature of the business.
Right.
But you could have a lot of information in weeks.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you very much. I really appreciated your comments.
Thank you. And I'll just remind folks, and I see Councillor Durkee's maybe doing it, but if you could just put down your hand once you put it up as well. So I'm seeing Councillor Lauren Cushing.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chris, I really appreciate your honesty in this session today. You showed and we have seen how those who are against certainly have their so-called facts all in place, and those who are for have all their facts in place, where in reality we have to look at both sides and just pick out the facts of each and make a determination. Then I thought it was a very good presentation, very helpful. Thank you.
If I can just add to that, one of my favorite quotes is from Benjamin Disraeli, who's the Prime Minister of England under Queen Victoria. And his comment was, there are three kinds of lies: lies, damn lies, and statistics.
Yeah.
Well put. Councillor Nick Hilton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chris, I was just wondering if you could elaborate. You kind of mentioned about the importance of municipalities getting involved in making some of these decisions. If you had any suggestions or any, insight into what other municipalities have done or haven't done when it comes to, allowing a change to our policies to allow something like on-land aquaculture.
I would suggest you reach out to the municipality of Guysborough. They have commissioned, and they've actually been renewing a study that was done on the social and economic impacts of the development of LNG, liquid natural gas terminals. And I think that work was quite extensive. I also had worked on it, but as part of the team. I think it took them, that project was a couple of months in duration. And it was quite wide sweeping. It looked at impact on fire halls, on security, because there was a significant construction going on for these kind of projects. So you have work camps. And it looked at all of these things and the impact on the municipality, so that the municipality would be well aware of how they would have to be prepared for this kind of project. I know that the larger municipalities, HRM and the 905 Toronto, they do a lot. They have full-time staff doing environmental assessment work.
Thank you.
Member Camo.
Thank you. Chris, early on in your presentation, and I was a little late coming on to the meeting, you talked about the importance of balance in reviewing these type of things. And just wonder if you can enlarge upon that a little bit, as whether or not the review and the balance review should be transparent or it should be behind closed doors.
Well, obviously, for good governance, it should be transparent. I'll give you one of the things that I was going to discuss in the presentation, the social aspects. An area where my own research has been in community-based co-management, and I'd worked in the Caribbean. I came home, went back to grad school again in the Marine Affairs program, at a time when co-management was just emerging as a popular theme back in the 90s. And one of the things we found is that as people are empowered to make decisions about their place, they will invest in their place. And what I've been, over the years, we've been doing a lot of work related to, we've been brought in to do consultations on marine protected areas when the government of Canada has had some controversies. We've worked with oil and gas engagements, and we've worked with tidal engagements. And all of them, I should say, my approach to all of this is always we have to be the honest broker. So whoever, they have to know that they don't have all the answers, and they have to listen to the community. And the community needs to be involved. And this is why transparency is important, is that as people feel that they're involved with making the decisions, they get greater trust in the future of their community. And what I'm seeing, and we're all seeing this, where people feel that the inshore commercial fishery, the lobster fishery in Nova Scotia, is being squeezed by space being occupied by other industries, and they don't have a say in it, they're not giving the same perception to their children that this is a viable future, because the negativity is being discussed. It's at the dinner table, it's out on the street, it's on Facebook. And if I was a young person wanting to get into an industry, I'd be looking at the lobster industry saying, why would I want to get into that? And this project is an example of that, where, you know, people feel like if you don't hear us, then there's no future. And that's where transparency is important. Getting people at the table talking together is part of that of the research that needs to be done, the information gathering.
Thank you. Are there additional questions from, I see Warner's, Mr. Camo's got a follow-up, perhaps.
Yeah, I'm just wondering how you talk about the siloed response, and you brought up the lobster fisheries, and that's I think that's key in this area, because there are a lot
Absolutely.
of threats to the lobsters, and we've got a lot of different things pulling at it. So I've always maintained, and I feel that we've always needed to diversify our economy somehow down in the southwestern area of the province. So I'm just trying to figure out how we balance the needs of keeping a viable lobster industry with the need to diversify our economy in various ways. And agriculture I see as being one of the key ways. When you touched on food insecurity, et cetera. So there's a lot of benefits to this. I'm just wondering how we can balance this out.
Yeah. Well, again, that comes from the point of getting people together to work together, and the adversarial relationships that are set up with public discourse about pro and anti-project, that polarizes people. To use a completely different example, the masking and non-masking, the camps became so polarized that we heard reports of families breaking up because of it, or, you know, vaccine or not vaccine, you know, where, you know, husbands and wives would divorce over the issue because they didn't want their kids vaccinated. That kind of polarizing thing is what happens because of the way social media, the way mainstream media is reporting, and it's not including those people in the discussion itself. The lobster industry is incredibly important to Nova Scotia, and we should be proud of the lobster industry in Nova Scotia. I whenever I'm away, I boast about our, I mean, we all know that the best lobsters in the world are from Southwest Nova Scotia. And well, actually, the best lobsters in Nova Scotia are from the LaHave Islands, but that's okay. Now you know where my family's from. But by making decisions where they're not involved can have that negative long-term impact on the social and economic impacts. Involving the lobster industry in the decisions and building the bridges. And if I was an aquaculture proponent, I would be coming in, and the first people I would talk to would be the people in the fishing industry. We don't do it that way, though. The way we go through things is, we get a regulatory permit, we'll go to the province. And it doesn't, and only when the regulations are the regulatory permitting is requires consultation, then do they go to the communities. But they should be going there first. And I think that's part of this. And that's where the municipality is, I think, important in this process, is that municipality has all of the players working together anyway. Like you just said. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
It appears we lost our chair, so we don't have a vice chair, but maybe Councillor Durkee, would you mind just stepping in and moderating until we get the chair back, please?
Not at all. And I actually am the vice chair, so that works out okay. All right. Does anybody else have any questions for Chris?
Lauren has his hand up.
Oh, sorry, Lauren. Go ahead.
Yeah. That was a good point you just made there, Chris, about when industry wants to come in, they talk to the government first, whereas in this particular case, they should have been talking to the lobster fishing industry and other sea harvesters first. And I think by going to the government first, then trying to get the government on side, it creates a lot of mistrust from the sea harvest industry towards government. For instance, they never asked us until we had to stand up and say, no, or we want more information, or, you know, so that that was a very good point. That's the first thing that should have been done, is talk to the industry that could be affected, that not would be affected, but could be affected by creating a new opportunity or new industry in well, in that particular area. You know, so that, I like that point. That was very good, because unfortunately, a lot of the public, you know, the government of all levels are not trusted. And I think that's one of the reasons why industry goes to the government first before they go to the people. Good point. Thank you.
Okay, my apologies. I lost power for a bit. Are there additional questions from the floor? Additional questions? I think I can see everybody. Okay. Well, thank you very much, Mr.
If you have questions, I think Jenny, is it Jenny?
Yes.
Yeah, Jenny has my email. So if you have any other questions, feel free to reach out.
Okay, thank you very much. Listen, excellent presentation and excellent answers to the PAC's questions. So having said that, we'll adjourn until 1 o'clock, when we'll be hearing from Jamie Simpson, environmental lawyer at Juniper Law. So I'll have somebody move for recess. Councillor Cushing, seconded by Warner Cremo. All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carried. I'll see everybody back here at 1 o'clock.
Thanks.
And thanks again.
Thank
Take care,
you.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chris.
Thanks, Chris.
No problem.
Thank you.
Thanks.